sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of red and orange. The city that once bustled with life was now eerily quiet, its streets deserted and shadows stretching long and foreboding. Sara clutched her backpack tightly, her knuckles white from the strain. The weight of the world seemed to rest on her shoulders, a world she barely recognized anymore. 2 years ago, the outbreak had started as whispers on the news. Isolated incidents of violence, people attacking one another with no apparent cause. By the time the term zombies was uttered, it was too late. The infection spread rapidly, consuming cities and nations. Governments collapsed, and the world plunged into chaos. Yet, amidst the ruin, there were pockets of survivors. People like Sara, who refused to give up. Sara had been a medical student before the outbreak, her days filled with lectures and dreams of becoming a surgeon. Those dreams felt like relics of another lifetime. Now, her knowledge was a precious resource, one that had saved countless lives in her small group of survivors. They called themselves the Haven, a motley crew of individuals united by the shared goal of survival. But survival wasn't enough for Sara. She wanted to find a cure. Her research had led her to an abandoned laboratory on the outskirts of the city. Rumor had it that scientists there had been close to a breakthrough before the outbreak overran their facility. Armed with this knowledge, Sara volunteered to venture into the heart of danger. She knew the risks. The city was a labyrinth of peril, with zombies lurking in every shadow. But Sara also knew she had no choice. If there was even a sliver of hope, she had to seize it. The streets were a haunting reminder of what had been lost. Cars were abandoned mid-drive, their doors hanging open. Billboards advertised movies and products from a world that no longer existed. Sara moved cautiously, her senses heightened. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the creak of a distant sign, set her on edge. Her hand hovered near the hilt of her machete, a weapon she had grown all too familiar with. Reaching the laboratory was no small feat. The building loomed ahead, its windows shattered and walls scorched. Sara's heart raced as she approached. She had planned meticulously, mapping out the safest route and memorizing the facility's layout. But plans could only take her so far. The unknown was a constant companion, whispering doubts into her ear. The laboratory's entrance was blocked by debris, but Sara managed to squeeze through a gap, her backpack scraping against the jagged edges. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of decay. She activated her flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. Papers and equipment were strewn across the floor, signs of a hasty evacuation. Sara's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything of value. She knew she had to find the research notes, the key to understanding what the scientists had been working on. The first few rooms yielded little. Broken vials, shattered computers, and cryptic notes that made no sense. But Sara pressed on, her determination unwavering. She entered what appeared to be the main lab, a large space filled with overturned tables and shattered glass. In the corner, a heavy-duty safe caught her attention. Her pulse quickened. If the research notes were anywhere, they'd be in there. She approached cautiously, her flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. The safe was locked, of course, and Sara cursed under her breath. She rummaged through the room, searching for a key or code. Time was of the essence. Every second spent here increased the risk of being discovered. Her efforts paid off when she found a blood-stained notebook beneath a pile of rubble. Inside was a series of numbers that looked promising. Sara punched the code into the safe's keypad, holding her breath as the mechanism clicked open. Inside, she found a stack of documents, vials of what appeared to be samples, and a flash drive. Her hands trembled as she packed everything into her bag. This was it. This was what she had risked everything for. But her moment of triumph was short-lived. A guttural growl echoed through the lab, sending a chill down Sara's spine. She turned to see a zombie shambling towards her, its eyes vacant and skin mottled with decay. Sara drew her machete, her grip steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. She had faced these creatures before and knew their weaknesses. A well-aimed strike to the head was all it took. The zombie fell, but the noise attracted others. The lab became a battleground as Sara fought her way through the horde. Each swing of her machete was precise, fueled by the desperation to survive. She couldn't afford to falter. The documents in her bag were too important. After what felt like an eternity, the lab fell silent once more, the floor littered with the remnants of her struggle. Exhausted but resolute, Sara made her way out of the building. The streets were no less dangerous, but she navigated them with the skill of someone who had learned to adapt. Her mind raced as she thought about the contents of the flash drive and documents. If the research held the answers she sought, it could change everything. Returning to the haven was like emerging from a nightmare into a fragile sanctuary. The group greeted her with a mixture of relief and awe. Sara wasted no time, gathering the team's most tech-savvy members to analyze the data. Hours turned into days as they worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of the scientists' research. What they discovered was both hopeful and harrowing. The infection was caused by a mutated virus, one that targeted the brain and reanimated the dead. The scientists had been developing a serum to counteract its effects, but their work was incomplete. However, Sara believed they had enough to continue where the original team had left off. The haven transformed into a makeshift laboratory, with Sara leading the charge. Her medical training became invaluable as she experimented with the samples, testing different combinations and analyzing results. Progress was slow, and setbacks were frequent, but Sara's determination never wavered. She knew the stakes were too high. One day, after countless trials and errors, a breakthrough occurred. The serum showed promise in neutralizing the virus in infected tissue. It was a small victory, but one that reignited hope within the haven. The next challenge was testing it on a live subject, a decision that weighed heavily on Sara. The risks were enormous, but the potential reward was too great to ignore. A captured zombie became their test subject, restrained and monitored closely. Sara administered the serum, her hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. The hours that followed were tense, filled with uncertainty and anticipation. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the zombie began to change. Its vacant eyes regained a glimmer of awareness, and its movements grew less erratic. The serum was working. The news spread like wildfire, sparking a renewed sense of purpose among the survivors. But Sara knew their journey was far from over. Producing the serum on a larger scale required resources they didn't have. They needed to find a functioning laboratory with advanced equipment, a task that seemed insurmountable. Yet, for the first time in years, the world didn't feel entirely hopeless. Sara's ultimate challenge had only just begun. Saving the world from zombies was no longer a distant dream but a tangible goal within reach. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But as she looked around at her fellow survivors, their faces alight with hope, she felt a surge of determination. They had come this far together, and together they would reclaim their world.